Do you think people can manufacture their outlook of what they want to see in life by changing their
Yeah, you
mindset?
can change your mindset, by changing your habits, by,
Yeah.
like I say, thinking a different way.
Yeah.
Just like anything, that stuff is habitual. If you're thinking positive, it becomes a habit. You're gonna always start thinking positive. You're gonna bring positive thoughts into your life. You're gonna start getting around positive people. But at the same time, if you're always thinking negative, that again can be habitual, and then you're gonna start thinking negative.
Thank you so much for being on here with
Well,
me.
thank you for having me here.
Absolutely. So I was telling the guys before we started recording, like you and I talk at the gym, like it's niceties and all this stuff like that, but like this is going to be cool because like diving into a different level of knowing each other, and to kind of, like I mentioned before we started recording, the mission of this podcast is to provide power ups. So what I like to do is start out with a pretty tough question.
Okay.
So let's play a hypothetical question. We have a magic machine that you can go back to any point in your life, and you can give yourself a power up. How we define power ups on here is that it's the action of turning your attention towards your intention.
Okay.
Okay. So you can go back to any point in your life and give yourself a power up. What age or what point would that be in your life, and why would you do it?
Well, there's a lot of, looking back, you can always, hindsight's 2020. So there's so many things that I could look at and go back to. To pick one, it'd be really hard. Uh, one of the things, I guess, to make it kind of not funny, but a kind of a joke. I grew up out in Lucy Depp Park,
Okay.
out in north of Dublin, just north of Shawnee Hills, with my great uncle. My great uncle raised me after my mom passed away. And I remember when I turned pro, we were out, Dublin was country back then. A lot of people don't understand. They think of Dublin now. But when I was going to high school in Dublin, we lived out in the country. And so he told me, he said, boy, you need to buy some land down the road. And I'm like, turned 21 years old. I mean, just turned pro. I said, land. I'm gonna buy a car. I'm typical young guy. Want to get a brand new car, this and that. And it turned out, years later, that land he was telling me to buy is now Tartan Fields.
Oh gosh.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So that's definitely one point I would love to go back to and listen to the one time I should have listened to my great uncle.
Yeah.
And I did not. And every time I drive out that way, I jokingly say, not necessarily joking, I feel this, he's passed away. I feel his spirit smacking me in the back of the head every time I drive past there.
Yeah, for context,
that would definitely be one of them.
Yeah, for context for everybody, like Tartan Fields is like, what, $1 million houses, like a bunch of them too. It's
right.
it's
and he wasn't telling me to buy it, all of it. Just buy a few lots out there, just get some land, because he had been here since he had built his place in 1960, so he had saw how that area was developing.
Yeah.
He had the hindsight to see, and for me, like I say, being young, I wasn't thinking about that at the time.
Right. So like going back to that like young age, Vince growing up in the country, like what about it was, I know from you and I talking before that you grew up in Buffalo, right?
Yes.
And then you moved to Dublin, which is a suburb of Columbus for anybody that doesn't really know what we're talking about. And like I know exactly what you're talking about. It was country. So what was it like to get kind of uprooted, so to speak, and put into that area? Was there pressures? Was there anything that you can kind of reflect back on that made you either excel on or off the field? Or
Oh yeah, most definitely. Like you say, I was born in Buffalo, New York. I was born and lived in Buffalo, New York till going to my freshman year in high school. My mother, who had passed away when I was 11 years old, her family lived in Columbus area. My grandmother, my mom's mother, my great uncle, who is my grandmother's brother, they were all from Ohio. And my grandmother and grandfather had moved up to Buffalo for work-wise, back in the early, I couldn't tell you back exactly when, in 1940s or so, something like that. So that's how we ended up in Buffalo, New York. But family was always here in Central Ohio. So we would always come and visit. And I remember after my grandmother passed away in 77, my mom had taken a trip down here to visit my great uncle, and he talked her into moving to Central Ohio, to the Dublin area, and things like that. So we would come to visit every year, and unfortunately, My mom passed away in '78, and so my stepdad still brought us down to visit family, and every year we were going to move here. Starting in 7th grade, we were going to move here, but it didn't happen until this summer going into 9th grade, and that's how I ended up here. And it was a change, big change for me, simply because living in the inner city, growing up in the projects, and then coming out here and you're in the suburban country type atmosphere, you have to go through changes. It was a bit of a change for me as far as, I went to school with, white kids in Buffalo, New York, but, we were bused to different schools. There was busing, so we didn't live in the same neighborhood as those kids. But then coming here and going to a school like Dublin at the time, which was, predominantly a white school, and, so it was like a culture shock, but at the same time, I was very fortunate to meet a lot of good people there. My high school coach, for one, Todd Alice, took me under his wing, and then my friends that I met, I was brought in with open hands. All the kids that I met, especially in my class, there were a number of kids that, took me in and, hung out, and it made a very smooth transition for me. I think playing sports helped also.
Right.
That helped me with that transition of moving here.
Have you always been just athletic? Was that something that, are you one of those people that just kind of, it just always, people say, oh, it just seems like it comes easy. Yeah. Was that always something that was?
Well, I was always loved sports, from as young as I can remember. Growing up in Buffalo, you had the Buffalo Bills there, Buffalo Sabres. And at the time, a lot of people may not remember, you had the Buffalo Braves basketball, the NBA team. The Buffalo Braves were there. But now the Buffalo Braves are I think they're the LA Clippers now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the Buffalo Braves. So we had, Buffalo was a big sports town back in the 70s. So I was always into sports. And I remember my mom, football was my number one sport. And my mom, where we lived, they didn't have a Little League football team. So we moved to a different part of town. So in 5th grade, she took me to sign up for Little League football. And that was my first love. But, my second love, and a lot of people don't realize, is my second love was hockey.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I was a hockey player for, football, hockey, and then basketball. But, yeah, hockey was my second love.
That's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
And so I would imagine, a young Vince would have dreamed of playing professionally one day. Or was that even in your thought process when you were that young? Did you, I was a huge baseball, so I would sit there and wiffle ball, and I would try to emulate all of my heroes, right?
Right.
Did you have that same sort of thing? And was there something that different about the way you thought about it?
Well, I mean, like any kid at that age, when you're young, you dream to play in, for your favorite NFL team or being in the pros and things like that. So that was no different for me. And, so I can't sit here and say I knew I was going to make it to the pros. I was just like any other kid. I want to play pro one day, but I didn't know the steps to get there. Just like normal kid, I want to be the next, at the time, being in Buffalo, this is the 70s, so this is no reflection of the man today. But I was a big O.J. Simpson fan because O.J. Simpson was the star of the team back
then. The Juice
in the 70s. Yeah, so everybody wanted to be the Juice.
Yeah.
But then after I remember my hero changed, I remember my younger brother was talking about this guy from Chicago Bears. He was the first one that pointed out. And then, then I saw Walter Payton play. I went to Buffalo. My dad took me to a Buffalo Bills game, and Walter Payton was playing against the Bills. And then after that, I became a Walter Payton fan. So that was my hero after that, after watching him play. But, yeah, so Walter Payton was my I wore 34 in high school because of Walter Payton.
That's amazing, yeah. Yeah, like it's a lot of like all basketball kids wearing 23 now, right? Yeah. It's that whole legacy thing, absolutely. Yes. So I guess the question I would have, like, kind of transition a little bit between like a younger person. If you were, as you are a coach now and taking all the stuff that you learned, is there something that you can recognize looking back at a younger you that you see in kids or people that are going to be a professional? Is there a dividing point for somebody that's playing sports and somebody that's going to play sports?
Well, I look at it as this, because I always tell people that, there's no 100% guarantee you're going to make it to the professional ranks. Because, you think about it, just less than 1% of high school athletes make it to, professional sports. So it's not a guarantee. You have a lot of great athletes, and this is one of those things that I learned after I was done playing football. There's great athletes across the board in every sport. And a lot of stuff comes into it. The timing. You got to have the talent, number one, but also you got to have the right time, be in the right time, right place. Things like that, and just being healthy. Staying healthy is a big part of it, and just having the right mindset. And I tell people all the time, sports is more about 80% mental and 20% physical. Because you got the physical tools, but it's that person that can be consistent that's going to make it to the next level and keep going. Because as you're in high school, you could be this high, your talent level can be this much, but then every time you go up, it just keeps shrinking and shrinking to this. And then that's a small amount of people, but they have all the similar skill sets.
Right.
And the person that doesn't make the most mistakes, makes the least mistakes, I should say, is the one that's going to be successful.
Right.
I mean, you look at it now across professional sports, the teams that are successful are the teams that make the least amount of mistakes.
Yeah. And I think that it's interesting that you mentioned like the mindset thing, because I would say that one of the things that I enjoy being around you the most is I honestly can't think of a time at the gym where I've seen you that you're not talking to everybody or dancing or just being like that shining light for somebody. Like, was that something that you felt you developed out of maybe things you didn't have in the past, or was it something that's always been part of you? Like what is that part of the makeup of you that has fed to what ultimately led to being a professional at many things, like, being what people would say on a pedestal of like,
Right.
They would look at you and say, that guy made it. Like, is that always been something that you've?
Well, I can't tell you. I've always had that entertaining part inside me. As going back to a little kid, 'cause I remember my mom would have friends over and stuff, and I always had to be that kid that was, I'm talking about back like 5, 6 years old.
Yeah.
The songs come on, they're playing music, and I got to be out there, being the singer. Especially back then in the '70s. Thing about the Jackson 5 were very popular, and they were still young at the time, so I was out there doing my best Michael Jackson moves and things as a kid. So that's always been part of me. Music has always been something that just makes me feel good. You know what I mean? It's ever since I can remember. So music comes. I tell people all the time, jokingly, says, some people have Tourette's where they just blurt out anything. I say I got dance Tourette's. Music comes on, I'm moving. Especially if it's a good beat.
Yeah.
I'm moving. But I've learned over the years of just wanted to help other people. I've always been that type of person that and I can't tell you where it began, how it began, but I've always been that person to try to help others, because there's people that helped me along the way to reach my goals. And I've always said, and go back to the old saying of Woody Hayes, pay forward.
Right.
So pay it forward. And so that's what I look at it as. I'm paying it forward by helping others.
Right.
Because there was somebody that helped me, so now it's my turn to help others.
So I would imagine, like, while you had those people that embrace you along the way, you've also dealt with your fair share of the opposite.
Oh, yes.
What if I'm somebody that says to you, hey, Vince, like, that's all cool. Like, but I don't have anybody that's a positive. Like, I don't have, everybody's always against me or everything. Like, what was it in those moments that you were able to pull from that allowed you to not react or not let those things start defining you? Like, if to achieve your ultimate goal or whatever it might be, like, what are some tools that you have leaned on in the past?
Well, don't get me wrong. I've made some mistakes in my life growing up, just like anybody.
Sure.
So I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
But like I say, I've had good people in my corner to help guide me. And I just try to be that person in people's lives to try to guide them. Because, you get to a certain age, right from wrong. And you try to, I've been fortunate to surround myself and be surrounded by people that were, for the most part, trying to help me out. Obviously, there's been some that were, pulling me down, but the majority of the people I've been around have tried to help me, bring me up. And so I try to do that for others. And I tell people, like I told my sons, I have 3 boys, and I tell them, choose your friends above you. You want to choose your friends above you so they can pull you up. Don't choose your friends below you because they're going to, pull you down, which is one of those things my great uncle had told me growing up. And my great uncle, he was, a fixture in my life, from the time I was 11 years old, till he passed away in 1993. adopted my brothers and I at 70 years old. You know, he, like I say, he was my grandmother's brother. So you got that big generation gap there.
Yeah.
So, you know, he's trying to relate to us. And, you know, he's born 1911, so we're trying to relate to his old ways and things like that. But it was a good match. It was a good match.
Yeah. Do you ever think like what? I guess it's like it's amazing. Like my grandma was the same sort of way with me. Like my grandma was the first person I remember telling me that it doesn't matter if you're not the same as everybody else.
Right.
Like you be you, and like it's amazing how important those people play. And it sounds like you had like a great system of that. Like how much did that get you through the moments where you wanted to quit or to push that next level? Was it like your great uncle, is that what you said, right?
Yes.
Your great uncle, is it kind of like he's always been your Mickey in the corner? Like,
well, him and my high school coach, definitely. You know, my high school coach was like a father to me. It was funny because, like I say, moving here, my great uncle coming from a different generation, going to the Dublin school system, he was, a little wary about me. Now people don't understand, there was always been, blacks that lived in the Dublin school system. They lived out in Lucedep Park where we were. Abram Depps, the story behind that is how that area got there. Abram Depps was a former slave, and he got, when he was freed, his owner willed him land here in southern Delaware County.
Okay.
And so he had, acres and acres of land there, like I say, just north of Shawnee Hills.
Okay. And
part of Shawnee Hills was his land at one time also. So they had, in the early 1900s, blacks would come there for, they had cottages there. So that was like their summer retreat. And then his daughter's nephew started selling off the land, but people buying lots. So now you got blacks living in the area, and obviously Dublin Schools was the closest school that they went to. So it wasn't like, I was the first, African-American to be in that area. They had been there since the 1900s. But my uncle was always very wary just because of his experience, as a black man growing up and, living in the United States from 1911 until, 1980.
Yeah.
So he was just more concerned about protecting us, because we were like fish out of water. We're coming from the inner city, coming out there, first time we saw light bugs, we were like freaking out. We were running around with switches and trying to hit the light bugs. And my uncle was like, no, come here. And he took the switch and he hit us. Like, now how you think that bug feels,
Oh.
So it was one of those days. He's a country man.
Yeah.
Country man, he was teaching us the ways. And but he was always one to tell me about humility. Teach me about humility and treating people the way you want to be treated, things like that. And, always be aware of, your surroundings, not taking in his old saying, don't take in any wooden nickels, things like that. But he was the one that always talked to me about education, and thinking for yourself. My high school coach was the one that taught me about work ethic. So I got to high school, and he was one of those coaches that, he played for Woody Hayes at Ohio State. He was a walk-on, but he played for Woody Hayes at Ohio State, so he took a lot of Woody's teaching with him as a coach in high school. And he's, not just myself with all of the kids he coached, and not just, football players, but athletes and students that weren't even athletes, he had a big influence on them. And he talked to me about work ethic, and he's the one that, kind of pushed me when it came to athletics. When there's days when I would get lazy in practice or something like that, he'd make sure that, I ran a few extra laps or something like that to make sure that, look, just because, you're the fastest kid out there, it doesn't mean you get to slack off or things like that. So he really pushed me and helped me to reach my goals also.
Yeah. In the professional like locker rooms and stuff like that, when the cameras are off on these guys and stuff, and I'm sure you got some good stories, but
oh yeah,
do you like when you look at the landscape of this professional world, or these people put the guys up on these different pedestals, right? You're like I said, so grounded and approachable and all that stuff. Like, was that a trend that existed in the locker room, or how much of what the person was like on the field in front of the cameras were they actually like behind the scenes?
Like for myself, or just in
like
general?
Just in general, like because you've went from playing to being like a scout. Like what was like, I guess, a trend that you would see that maybe these people, because what I'm trying to picture is that there's somebody like a kid out there trying to figure out like, I want to make it there, and these are the things I got to adopt. And wait, he's saying it's 80% mental. Like, you know, how much of that is persona that you have to like, these guys have to like almost like manufacture versus genuine? Is it?
Well, it's both. You gotta manufacture some of it, but if either you have, it's like that old saying, if a little puppy bites, it's gonna bite when it gets bigger, and so it's just one of those things. And for me, the way I am is just who I am. I mean, I don't manufacture anything. It's just who I've always been. I've always been that silly kind of guy. I've always been, the happy-go-lucky guy, and I've always been one to try and be like a median. Try to not the spiritual median, but somebody that's always trying to bring people together. If I see two people who are having issues, I'm the one to try to talk to them both. Like, hey, what's going on, man? How about we, look at it this way? I try to look at the positive of everything. Because there is always a positive everything, and I try to be positive. I've had tragedy in my life, like anybody else. I've had my downs as well as my ups, but I try to look at the positive, and if you can, if you're always feeling down, if you're always thinking the negative is gonna be a reality.
Right.
Just like the same thing. If you're thinking positive and you're trying to be positive about everything you do, eventually that positive thinking is gonna help you be successful.
Do you think people can manufacture their outlook of what they want to see in life by changing their mindset?
You can change your mindset, by changing your habits, by thinking a different way.
Yeah.
Just like anything, that stuff is habitual. If you're thinking positive, it becomes a habit. You're gonna always start thinking positive. You're gonna bring positive thoughts into your life. You're gonna start getting around positive people. But at the same time, if you're always thinking negative, that again can be habitual, and then you're going to start thinking negative. So it's about surrounding yourself with good people. And like for me, as at Peak, we have a great team there. And we've had, other trainers over the years, and some trainers just didn't fit what we were trying to do. But Alex does a good job of hiring, people that fit with us. But he doesn't just hire them and he says it's okay. He lets us be a part of that and to see how we feel about the person that's coming in. Because he may be comfortable with him doesn't mean everybody else is comfortable with him.
Right.
With the person coming in. So we do that as one of those things. So I say surrounding yourself with good people is one of those things that you got to do. And good right from wrong as you get older. And the people that are in your corner that's trying to help you to get where you want to go. And those people that are there just because you're successful and they don't want to just pull on your coattail. So you got to surround yourself with positive people.
Absolutely. And how much do you think that goal setting plays in that process of, or do you think if you were to sit there and say on a scale, is it goals or habits that are the things that get you to where you want to go? Like, what is your thoughts on that? Like,
well, you got to have a goal. I mean, you have long-term goals, you have short-term goals.
Right.
Obviously short-term goals are good to have because it gets you into practice into, preparing for those long-term goals. If you got short-term goals, say for this week, this week I want to be able to, train, 5 days a week. And so your goal is to get into the gym 5 days a week. That's a short-term goal. But then eventually that short-term goal is going to turn into 6 months, a year. And in the long run, you're going to be successful. But that's with anything, not, because I'm a trainer, I'm talking about training. But that could be anything in life. But you got to set goals. You got to sit down, plan out your week. Sunday or whatever, whenever your week begins, say Sunday, okay, I want to do this week. You write it down. If you write it down, it's there. You know that it's there. So you come back to it and say, okay, I did that. I did this. Oh, I didn't do that. So now okay, next week I'll make sure I get that in. So writing down your goals for the week, it gets you into practice for longer term goals.
And how, like in the process of like somebody that is working towards a goal, and how important is it to look for those mentors that are going to help pull that stuff out of you in your process of thinking about when you're, let's say I'm a guy that like that this kid's really talented, or you see somebody and you're not the mentor. How much do you put emphasis on seek, like those people telling them like seek out these other people too, and make like a whole team to surround yourself by?
Well, it's easier said than done. As a youngster, sometimes young people aren't comfortable, reaching out to other people for help. I was like that in school when I first moved there, and I tell you the story about myself when I first moved to Dublin, moving from inner city school. Academically, I was behind because I'm, the type of teaching and the pace they taught, back in Buffalo in inner city school. When I moved to Dublin, they were already progressed a little bit faster and further along than what I was at coming in. So I was struggling a little bit my first couple of years, but my problem was I never asked for help. I was trying to figure it out myself, and I was struggling because I didn't know how to do. I'm trying to play catch up, but I didn't know how to play catch up. And then finally, my high school coach took me under his wing, because when it came to a point where, okay, this kid has some talent, he may have a chance to go to college, but he's got to get his grades up. So he took me and made me, start, studying, and he helped me along in that aspect. But I didn't know how to ask for help because I was embarrassed to say I don't know.
Yeah.
I was embarrassed to say I need help. And that could be in some cases with some kids. They may, and even adults may be like that too. Right. Some adults, try to figure it out on their own and they won't ask for help. So asking for help is sometimes some people look at it as, being soft or being, weak. But it's not being weak because we all need help. Like I say, I've made to where I got to be because somebody helped me. There's not a person in here that has, that you see that saying all the time. And you say that because my son brought this. So my son's 33 years old, lives in Minneapolis. And he said he had got his first tattoo. And he said, had a cross on it, said self-made. And he said, I'm changing that. He said, what do you mean? I said, why are you changing it? He said, because as I've gotten older, I realized nobody's self-made. Everybody has needed help to get to where they're at. Nobody has made it themselves by themselves.
Right.
And I thought about it, like, you know what, that is true.
Yeah.
There's nobody that's been successful in life that has made it by themselves. They've always had help somewhere along the way.
Yeah. Man, I just want to echo that. I think everybody thinks that certain people are meant to be certain things, but they don't really realize that mountains are moved by a team, and it's by asking people for a direction. And, I think what a great way to kind of wrap this up is asking a question that kind of sums up a little bit of this idea of if I am somebody that is trying to achieve something that others have told me is impossible, what would be a huge starting point? And what would be something that you would recommend for them if once they hit the first brick wall? Because as well as I do that you're going to hit that wall hard multiple times. If you could take a look back at from high school to OSU to pros to being after playing, what it would be some key elements that you would recommend to those people when they hit that wall? It's one thing to write the goals. It's one thing to change the habits. But how do you what would be a couple of resilience tips that you would give to somebody?
Well, definitely don't quit. Obviously, you hit that brick wall, keep trying. If, you keep trying, obviously the old saying is, how many times you're going to hit your head against the wall. You may just have to find another way around the wall. You know what I mean? Maybe you can't go through it here. Okay, find somebody else that can help you to maybe get you up a little bit higher on that wall. And somebody else, that's where the help comes in. You get people to help you to get you up the wall to the point where you can cross over the wall instead of just trying to go through it, so that does help. That is one of the things I would say. Okay, you can't do it yourself. Find somebody else that can help you to help you reach your goal. That'd be one of the things I would definitely give, advice to someone. Yeah, and I think a lot of times people think that a professional athlete doesn't. It's always been easy for you, and I think that what's amazing is that your stats are amazing, but if it was easy, your stats would be 10 times higher than that, right? Exactly. If that was easy, we all, like that saying, if it was easy, we all be doing it. We'd all be doing it. That's right. Like I tell people all the time, I got to play 8 years in NFL, and I was fortunate to play one. Right. Because I realized how hard it is to make it to that level. Not just to make it to that level, but to stay. Right. Because the average NFL career is only 3.5 years. Wow. And if you see people all the time, they're like, well, this guy plays, got to be, you can't use these guys that only played 1 year. How do you come up with the average then? Right. If you don't use everybody, right. It just shows you how many people that they make it, but they don't last. Right. And it's the turnover. The turnover, being like I say, when I became a scout, that was my job to we were always scouting players, scouting our own team, and we're always looking for players to upgrade the team. So you're always looking for guys to bring in that you think are better than the guys you have.
Absolutely. Well, guys, as we got to wrap this up here, I just want to like celebrate your willingness to come in here and share your story. And while it has been told through a football filter, and because this is what and this
Right.
or how you've your background and stuff like that, I just really hope people understand that all of this stuff can be applied to every aspect of your life. I think that a lot of times people will pigeonhole people and think that like, oh, well, this person's a personal trainer, so he's judging, me if I'm, eating a burger and fries, and they always put these things on people when they look at it from the outside. But I just love the fact that like you came in here and we were able to sit down and have like this conversation where you really kind of, to me at least, listening to you, it rips that whole stereotype off where it goes like, it doesn't matter what you're trying to do out there, that there's a way to get there if you work hard and ask for help. As you said, your great uncle sounds like an amazing human.
Yes.
I would have loved to have been able to talk with him.
His name is James Overby. We call him Uncle James or Uncle Jimmy, or some of the kids around the neighborhood just call him UJ.
UJ?
And we have UJ-isms. Everybody has their little story about certain sayings that he would say. But to go back to what you were saying about everybody thinks, because you're a professional athlete or a trainer, that you're always on point. I have a picture. When I retired from football, I was still training and stuff like that. But I got to times like, why am I training? Like, I don't play anymore. And, and I gained weight. I had put on weight, and I had left it. And I got done playing the NFL. My last season, I was weighted about 205. And I got up to 240 pounds. And then I realized, look, what am I doing? Something clicked, and I looked at myself in the mirror like, man, you need to get back in shape. So I worked myself back into shape. And people were like, oh, you're never. So I got a before and after picture of myself of when I call myself roly-poly. And I got a picture of, after I, made the transformation back. I said, look, it happens. Just because I was a professional athlete doesn't mean that I'm not human.
Right.
You see professional athletes get out of shape all the time. For me, because of my background and having the history of training, it didn't take a long. It was easier for me, not easy, but easier for me to get that mindset into getting back into shape. But I was letting people know it happens.
Yes.
I get out of shape just like anybody else. Professional athletes get out of shape like anybody else. So we're human just like you. So it is possible. If you're out of shape, you can get into shape. You can, we have mental issues like anybody else. We have family issues like anybody else. It's all about reaching out for people to get help, get somebody to help you, because there are people out there that are feeling the same way you are. You just might not know it because they don't speak about it.
That's amazing. Vince, I want to, again, just appreciate you. Like, just the message is great. Guys, listen to this man. Ask for help. If you're struggling with stuff, there's no shame in asking for help. No. One thing that you can do is provide a little hope for us is share this episode. Like, in the show notes, you'll have ways. I'll make sure that all Vince's Instagrams and all that stuff like that are on there, so you can follow him, follow along with him. Great dude. I mean, he's, like I said, always dancing. I just want to say like how much I appreciate you being in my life. I really do. I know that we don't crisscross a lot, but when we do, I always am so happy to see you, and we talk about documentaries and all that good stuff like that. So just thank you so much. And guys, if you got any value of this, like I said, please share it. Let us know how we did. And we hope that this provided you with a power up.
Foxland Media. Think big.